So my name is Oliver. I am the Young Carers Coordinator at AMI-Quebec. AMI-Quebec is the first family association in Quebec, so it supports families of people living with mental health challenges. The Young Carers kind of dossier is a bit different for us. We're approaching it as a risk factor for youth mental health. That's the tie-in to what our organization does. But the topic's broad. It's about young people who find themselves taking care of, supporting a loved one with a disability, with mental health challenges, with chronic illness, substance use issues. Sometimes it's children that do translation for newcomers. Really broad topic. And that's part of why I want to hear like where each of you are coming from. Maybe you can just briefly introduce yourself, your work context. Maybe tell me too, have you ever heard the term young carer? I'll start with you on this side, if that's all right.
Sure. It's Louise Hinton. I'm a translator for the Ministère de l'Éducation in the back. So I'll just turn so everyone can see. I translate all kinds of things. There's a team of us. There are about a dozen translators. We translate from French to English, and we each have our own little area of expertise. And so, excuse me, I do a lot of text about bullying or sort of the social issues around school, not necessarily the pedagogy. I also do some English as second language, but I'm just fascinated by this. I had never heard the term young carers, but I do know AMI-Quebec, and I think it's great that there's a talk about this, and I'm really interested to hear what you will say. Anything and all the topics that you mentioned would be interesting for me. I think what I'm looking for is like terminology and how we use words. So yeah. Just the term young carers, that's a new term for me, and I'm really interested to hear that.
Awesome.
I'm Debbie Horrocks. I'm from Word. And yes, we have collaborated with AMI-Quebec, and certainly we have attendance at your forum. LearnWorks, we primarily work with the network of community learning centers across the province. So we work with the 90 schools who are part of the community learning center approach.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha McDonald. I'm a project development officer at Riverside School Board. I work specifically in the adult education sector, developing marketing, communications, and community engagement and outreach. But I'm also the co-chair of our center's mental health committee. So this is why I find this very interesting. I don't know, though it's youth, I mean, most of our students are 16 to 34, but I do know for a fact that a lot of them are dealing with their own parents, perhaps, who have some mental health issues. And so really curious to know a little bit more about that.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll put left to right.
Yeah, sure. My name is Alexandre No. Happy to be here. I'm from the Office of Official Languages, and I'm here to learn. I spoke with our animator a little bit before, and his topic piqued my interest. And so that's why I'm here. I obviously became interested in the health file. It was my policy file when I worked back in Gatineau, the policy team at the Office of the Commission on Official Languages. So, of course, I'm interested.
Great. And yourself?
Hi, Oliver. I'm Kate Lemaitre. I'm unaffiliated at the moment, but I'm just here to learn and to listen.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Cindy Lockhart. I'm from the Quebec Federation of Home and School. I represent lots and lots of parents and lots of kids from very young to high school. I personally I worked for 21 years in the school system with special needs children. And so I know about what they do, but I've never heard that word before. So I'm really interested and love to get the word out later.
Awesome.
Hey, my name is Trevor Mercer, and I'm the director. I wish I was a director, but I'm a coordinator of vocational training, and I've been with the Cree School Board for 20 years. But just 3 years in this position, and it's my 33rd year in education, and I'm originally from Newfoundland. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Christine Nairn. I'm the educational consultant for vocational programs for all of the Cree communities. I'm on a team that is called Student Success. And we do support our adult students, most of whom are parents themselves. In whatever they need to keep going to school and so this topic is very, very relevant to what we do.
I'm Eric Grimstead. I wish I was unaffiliated, so I'm the center director of a adult education vocation center in Chisasibi, Quebec, for the Cree School Board in northern Quebec. And I've never heard of either organization, but I'm very glad to have bring it.
So,
Hello, my name is Giselle, and then programs manager at Reintegration in Montreal. I work with the Groups project. Basically, what we do is that we set up community libraries in our partners' locations, and it could be any organization that works with children from 0 to 8 years old. So we work with a lot of daycares, especially in the NBG area. We have right now 180 partners. Not only in NBG, but areas close to NBG as well. And this is our director, Asha.
So my name is Asha Dixit. I'm the executive director of the Fraser-Hickson Institute. We work in the sector of early learning and early literacy. We're all about that. We work with children 0 to 8 and their families. We want to promote books, reading, stories, love of reading in the community. And I haven't heard the term young carers, but we were just discussing before. We have a great potential to collaborate in that sector with linking literacy, reading, and mental health.
And if we can spread the word, to our partners, especially daycares, it would be lovely to bring some of that home.
Yeah.
Exactly. Did you have a chance yet?
No, hi everyone, I'm Lorraine O'Donnell. I work at QUESCREN, so one of the organizers of today's event, and I just want to say thank you all for coming. I love the vibe in the rooms. So, my personal interest in this, I'm a historian, and something I'm becoming more and more aware of is the profound impact of poverty on English-speaking Quebecers, past and present. And I'm just curious to know and to hear whether there are particular issues for people who are poor.
Awesome. No, I think we have a really interesting mix of people, and a lot of you are focusing on looking at like a whole family and the larger context of how people come through our education system, come to it. And I think that's perfect for this type of topic. It's the type of mindset that we need to have, and it's about coming together around it. I wanted to play a little video because it's 1 minute long and it explains what a young carer is better than I can actually off the cuff. And then maybe we can just talk about if you've encountered students like this in your experience.
It's a lovely and carefree day for Nora, but not for everyone. It's a sunny day for a date too, but it's far from bright. Behind every forgotten assignment, Adib bathed his father or administered his medication. Behind every excuse, Adib is proud to be there for his father. He carries a lot on his shoulders for a boy his age, and he is not the only one. Young caregivers are everywhere, and there are more of them than you would think. There are some who have to take care of urgent errands even on their birthday, or who have had to call an ambulance too often. Others become their parents' translators and have to fight against stereotypes. There are a variety of different situations that lead a young person to take care of a loved one, such as illness, old age, or disability. But the love we feel for a suffering relative is universal. For more information related to the different realities of young caregivers, click here.
So I like it because it brings it down to like actual experiences, what they're functionally doing to help their families. And like I said, it's very broad, very different kind of set of circumstances that they can find themselves in. But the thing that really unites a lot of these young carers is their emotional maturity, their empathy, their connectedness to family, the importance of their family for them. We didn't really mention siblings And I think that we often overlook the fact that even a younger sibling can be taking care of the eldest child in a family. And then I also think that we really need, in our current mental health context for youth, I think that you have a lot of students that are caregivers for their friends. A lot of youth aren't accessing our public health system for mental health supports. They're going to their friends, or young professionals are going to their colleagues instead, because they have that same experience and they feel more able to talk about it. Yeah.
But they're not only going to their friends, they're going to the internet
Yes.
and social media, which is, I need to be addressing that too, because that's a big,
We can definitely. I mean, it all feeds into itself. I see a lot of posts on, I kind of monitor Reddit to look at how many young care stories come through, and a lot of them do. There's a lot of people that, you know, kind of throw it out into the void on the internet. I'm taking up as a second job in high school to help support my family financially, and my parent is really ill but doesn't want to seek professional help. And you know, what do I do and who do I turn to? And in Canada, it's a really emergent issue, and we're trying to make it clearer where they go, where that first point of contact is. And I think that it's something that on a school board level, probably you need to think about. Is that something that we have a capacity to delegate a professional in our school system to say that maybe in every school there's a counselor that in particular has some training on this, or a teacher that is equipped to do it? Or do we need to really reinforce what the referral pathway looks like to get them to somewhere like AMI-Quebec or the public system?
Often it's the teacher education programs too, right? It should be integrated somehow into the teacher, the whole thing. Because being a teacher is not just about educating kids anymore. It's so much more. This to me should be part of that package.
Definitely.
We had the last number of years, we had an epidemic of students having panic attacks. So especially as a principal of a high school, and it was like, these students were having these panic attacks and they were turning them into medical emergencies because they were hyperventilating. And we couldn't, so it's a school of 550 students and we couldn't keep on top of it. So we brought in people to train students, and the students ended up most of the time being the first person that was intervening and de-escalating the situation. So it kind of strikes the same thing as what you're saying, is using the peer-to-peer.
I'm a huge proponent for the peer model, just for the sake of they're gonna go to their friends anyway, and would we rather equip them to be able to deal with these situations or try and pretend that that's not gonna happen, right? That model is actually something that a groupement that I'm part of in my position is seeking to do, but they're having a little trouble getting it off the ground. So I'd love to hear like how that was rolled out. Maybe I can grab contact info after. And that would be across the province, and it would be like kind of a dam breaking moment in terms of support, because you'd be able to say, Avant de Craquer, which is the groupement, has agents that are supporting a peer network across schools across the whole province. I saw a hand before.
No, I was just wondering if I remember my daughter was trained as a peer counselor when she was in high school. Does that kind of program still exist in the schools?
I wouldn't know. Yeah.
That was a good program because, again, you know, it was a bit heavy for the peer counselors, or it could be, but they had the resource. There was always an adult they trusted that they could go and talk to. And their peers were more likely to go to them than to a teacher, you know.
Yeah.
It was called peer counseling, and
they still have counselors, they have everything in the school system, but just there's not enough, you know, the students still seem to like to go to
the internet.
the peers or the internet, more the peers than But all the resources are there, just very little.
I would say it probably depends on the school. Some of them do train their older students, especially in the region where they have K-12 schools, K-11 schools. Yeah, the older kids are trained to work with younger kids in certain areas, but I don't know. It's probably not in relation to a lot of this type of stuff, but more on school board, school playground stuff and.
Well, yeah, this was pretty doesn't do that stuff. That's the playground students program for playgrounds.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that programs like that or the peer model like this is something that could just be added. It's just an extra kind of sensitivity or an awareness that needs to be present in our already existing youth mental health services. Some of them, like you're saying, there's kind of a lack of access to services already for youth, so we will have to kind of co-create them in some cases, but in a lot of cases, the models exist or the services exist, and then we're just trying to add that awareness and sensibility that a student may come forward that they're really stressed and really anxious about, missing assignments and things. And as part of your protocol, one of the questions you can ask is there illness in the family? Are you helping, or what is one of your friends going through a really tough time right now? That's something that I keep hearing from teachers that they're like, now that you mention it, yeah, a lot of those kids that are kind of verging onto crisis have friends that are in an even worse situation. And we would be remiss to not connect the dots and think about the impact on that friend, on that family member. I want to just do it. Just talk about the impact on the youth that are caregiving. So on average, these kids are doing 14 to 27 hours a week of caregiving. Some of them are doing in excess of 50 hours a week. Things that are varying from just being very conscious, kind of walking on eggshells around a family member that is kind of prone to crisis, or trying not to trigger things that way, trying to be on your best behavior so that you're that kind of stabilizing force in the family. To me, that's caregiving. It's an act of care, and it's probably accompanied by things that are more concrete, things like listening to someone vent on a regular basis. Being the emergency contact is a huge responsibility, and it means that these youth are essentially on call. If you've ever done on-call work, you know that you're kind of working all the time, or you're like ready to jump into action. So that weighs on them really heavily. About 60% of young carers report that they are experiencing a mental health fallout because of this. They have anxiety and stress. A lot of them have physical symptoms as well. You can imagine if, children, and we're talking about like 5 to 25, this age range. And it doesn't suddenly start once they turn 18. It doesn't suddenly start when they turn 15. There's really young kids that are helping to administer medications. There's youth that are helping to do transfers for people with physical disabilities. And there's youth that are handling kind of some of those bureaucratic elements that come along with having a health condition. So filing paperwork, accessing internet services if a family member is like, what is this click santé, or like, what's going on with this? A lot of kids help with that. And so we can talk a lot about the negative impacts and what it means for them. But I do want to talk about strengths a bit, because I hope that when we're addressing this, we can bring it to an asset-based kind of model. Look, these young people have incredible strengths and incredible resilience because of the situation they're in.
Does the scope of this include young caregivers dealing with addiction and mental health in the adults?
Yeah.
And navigating what's around that? Yeah,
exactly. And that's like a very sensitive, very particular one. Chabad Lifeline does really good work around that, where they're an addiction services organization, but they take kind of a whole family approach. So they give services to the person seeking help for their substance use, but then they also ask who else is in the family. They take a look at who's around that person, what professional services they're already accessing, and then they ask the question, who's filling the gaps? which ultimately is what the young carers are doing. And they launched a youth program last year, I think, or at least really buffed up what the service offering was to take care of the young carers, because that is one example that I think really needs a specialized approach. It's such a particular situation and it needs to be integrated with the base services that the loved ones is accessing.
The name of the organization.
Chabad Lifeline. So CHABAD. So I wanted to ask what the strengths are that come out of this. You know, what kind of character does this build? What kind of literacy does it build for these young people?
Empathy, more of empathy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Empathy and really intimate insight into what it's like to live with a disability or with substance use. Yeah.
Advocacy.
Yes. They're amazing advocates. And if you meet some young carers and young carer speakers, you notice that there's a very particular type of character. They're used to advocating for someone that maybe doesn't get their basic needs met without that advocacy. Yeah. Yeah. Emotional resilience. Resilience too, because this isn't, if it's in the family, it's forever. Right. And young carers understand that. They understand that there's a longevity to this. It's not an acute crisis that's happening. This is something that they're going to have to deal with through their life course.
Coping skills ties in with that.
Absolutely. I would say they're really good at coping with their own stress and anxiety. A lot of them are also really good at kind of co-regulating. So with the person that they're helping to manage their emotions as well, or validate their feelings and kind of partner with them to get through a crisis.
Organizational skills.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's young people that show up in appointments with their loved ones to like a GP, and they have a folder of printed out stuff to help advocate, to help to keep track of things. It's a form of care I do for my partners. I go to her appointments with her and I translate, but I also take notes, because sometimes the barrage of information is a lot to take in. If you've ever been in an appointment, especially with a specialist, you kind of leave and you're like, I hope I remember what I was supposed to do, or I hope I noted everything that I needed to, and you're coping emotionally with what's being given to you, but then you're also trying to take down the practical notes. Yeah. I want to bring it back to the assets, because I think like, I don't want you to leave today and have a checklist of like, this is all of the specific ways a student could be struggling and they're going through a horrible time, and you have this really negative picture of young carers. I think that this is an area where there's such a potential to talk about the good that they're bringing to their family, to their society, and into their classroom as well. These are people that we want in the workforce because of that empathy, because of their understandings of intersectionality. Like, for me, they're a priority to get into the types of vocations where they're helping us build a more caring society, because who better to do it than people that have had to do that since the age of 5. That said, we do need to know how to identify them. So some of the things that how this can kind of manifest at school, obviously the types of upsets that can be happening in the family and in the home can mean that deadlines are missed, that homework is maybe done at a last minute and handed in a little bit, what did I write, sloppy? Yeah, I couldn't find a better word for it. But it also can mean that they don't have time for extracurriculars. It can mean that they don't have time to kind of forge the bonds with their friends that they would like. So they might be kind of socially isolated. They might have really good friendships at school and at lunchtime, but they aren't going to hang out after school at the mall, or I don't think they hang out at the mall anymore, wherever they do now. And then they also can be missing actual days of school. On average, a young carer misses 1 to 2 days a month of school, which is a lot. It adds up really quickly. And when real crisis hits, it can be up to a week at a time, right? Where the whole family kind of gets uprooted and you're at the hospital for hours a day. And then the other thing that can happen is bullying. And what I mean by that is that they're usually bullied by virtue of their family being different. So if you have a parent with a disability and kids poking fun at how your parent is different from theirs, or if they have a sibling with a disability, particularly an intellectual disability, or if they're on the spectrum, or if they can present as sort of manic, I guess. A lot of the time, there's a bullying that happens obviously on that sibling, but it can actually extend out into the young carer as well. And part of the care that they do a lot of the time is kind of mitigating the effects of that bullying that's happening based on that difference. I want to check in. You'll notice I'm like, I want to have a conversation. I really don't want to just present today. Does any of this resonate? Like, is this stuff that you've seen, or is it sort of news to you? What do you think?
I've seen it quite a bit in our adult ed sector.
Yeah.
I say quite a bit. I mean, I've heard a handful of stories, but if I've only heard a handful, there's more than exist out there. We, for example, we have a big event that we organize every year. It's a mental health talk, and we invite guest speakers to come and share their stories at the end. And this past year, we had a student come up to myself and my other co-chair asking, I know this is another time we're going to speak about my own experience. Sure, go ahead. And his experience was, something similar where I received adult ed that this guy was in high school and he had to drop out of high school because of some very detrimental substance abuse issues with his mother. Yeah. And he dropped out of high school to then essentially just trying to take care of her and be regular for the family, if you will. And through adversity and he came out of it, and now he's coming back and doing his high school diploma about 10 years later. So it's nice to see kind of like the phoenix rising a little bit from these people that have gone through really hardships and been forced to grow up a little bit quicker than they wanted to, but come back and actually try and start fresh and make things themselves.
Yeah, I would think that it's probably a lot of people in adult ed and in different vocational programs too. I think that you kind of take an alternate course sometimes, or a different course. Homeschooling as well. I can imagine that some of these families, if they're dealing with more extreme end of this, where the parents are caregivers themselves, maybe taking care of each other or one of their children, and then choosing to go a homeschool route so that they have more continuity, a little bit more control of the pacing and things like that.
The reality in the North and Indigenous communities is probably similar to immigrant families, where you have multi-generations in a house. So having lived and worked in the North for 20 years, I've seen this from, I was teaching grade 4 and I asked, well, where's this? Oh, she's babysitting her little baby sister. So it's almost, in that case, it seems like it's a cultural expectation.
Absolutely. And that contributes to two things. One is that most young carers don't identify themselves. They don't recognize what they're doing as caregiving, because even in the caregiving world, most of the time we think of someone older taking care of an aging parent, right? We're starting to realize that you can take care of someone in a mental health context, or that young people can be doing this too. So it contributes to the fact that we kind of normalize it for ourselves. Most young carers will say, I've always done this, I just help my family. A lot of them really reject the term caregiver, which is why this will be interesting for you, why we very consciously choose to say young carer. It's just like 1 degree less of giving and it being put that way.
I like that expression, cultural expectation, because I worked with cultural groups here in Montreal, where the expectation was that the girl would look after her brothers, make sure they were breastfed, whatever, before she was allowed to go to school. Can you talk about that at all? Is there any, do you notice any gender differences and carers and?
I mean, so I'll preface this by saying that research is pretty lacking in this, especially within Canada, and then even to a higher degree in Quebec specifically. But from what we know from the General Social Survey, 2018, they asked a question about this, only for 15 to 25-year-olds, not including the territories, take it with a grain of salt, but 70% were girls. Yeah, and through the life course, caregiving is usually equal when they're very young. International research shows this. And then as we age, that gender gap gets larger until most caregivers, or for young carers, are common law young women caring for in-laws or their parents or for their children.
The flip of that up north, with the young men are expected to go out hunting in the season still. And we would lose them in the fall for moose hunting and in the spring for goose hunting. So we built in, we have a 2-week goose break instead of a March break, but still we're losing young men for, they're basically dropping out of school in April.
Yeah.
And it affects the ministerial exams because in second, 4 and 5, they're still in the push probably a month.
Yeah.
When the exams going to start, right?
Right. Well, it's good that you line up the break at least to like mitigate that impact. It's what we need to do. Yeah.
He's still flying a 2-week period.
Yeah. And then the second thing I wanted to say about culture is that in communities where there is that generational expectation or that there's multi-generational homes, obviously young caring is going to be more prevalent, but I would also say that that society is set up in such a way as to pre-see those needs and meet it so that those young people might actually be in a better situation than I can speak for myself. There isn't that expectation in my family, but members of my family that have had to take on caregiving, it's sort of thrust upon them and it's this big surprise and they're really sort of rudderless, like they don't know how to cope with that situation because it wasn't an expectation. I'm gonna just move through. I think that we're getting this sort of thing. I don't want to spend too much time, but these are the types of questions that you can ask in terms of an intake for a counselor or in that peer model. These are the types of questions you could include as you're talking to a young person to consider whether there might be caregiving present. Go ahead.
I wasn't organizing at this level. Could you share your slides?
Yes.
With the group, because I think, there's so much there.
Yeah.
So we can follow up so that you don't need to worry about missing some of the details. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. Go ahead.
Would you see if you went back to the previous slide, is that something you would see about like teachers or principals sort of trying to explore? Because when the list on the previous page, when, a lot of those things, while they apply to young carers, they could also apply to other things. And I'm guessing that young carers don't even come into the questioning in a lot of the situations where bullied, the person is bullied or the whole list of and distracted. It could be a lot of things. Young carers probably isn't even something that's in the context of a lot of our educators in our schools, right? So they don't know that they're just assuming it's something else or.
Yeah, I would say basically it's like look for these things and then as you kind of triage their needs as you would with any student, the second kind of follow-up questions are these to put that information into context and then get a little bit deeper into it to see if this is actually one of the root causes or something on the side that you can help mitigate some impact by if you have contacts with a social worker in your school and you can help them to get some home care, there goes 10 hours of caregiving that the youth has to do on the side as well as dealing with their own mental health. It would be a huge impact.
Are you reluctant to admit they're caregivers?
Definitely. And it's kind of it's the stigma attached to it. So they first of all have to out oftentimes the person that they're caring for. So they have to say, my parent has a disability and struggles with these things, and I help with them with that. There's a huge amount of stigma for that, especially for parents with disabilities. Dawn Canada does a lot of really good work. They're a Montreal-based organization that works with disabled mothers to address a lot of that stigma. Yeah, they're reluctant to admit it because of that. And then the fear is that, you know, Child Protective Services gets involved. And that's particularly true for racialized people or Indigenous communities, which have a pretty well-founded fear of that, given our history as a nation.
The protection, like the involvement, I could see why they're. I'd be curious to know more about that.
About which aspect
Well,
of it?
the youth protection involved, they're afraid to, that they report like.
Yeah.
That's.
I think that the way to address it is to really be upfront and clarify your duty to report obligations. And to make it clear that being a caregiver isn't, a young person taking on caregiving isn't like child abuse. It very distinctly isn't. There's parts of caregiving that can present a physical or an emotional risk to that young person. And those are the things that we need to help mitigate. But there needs to be a lot of work done by people that know a lot more about that duty to report situation than I do, to clarify that for the professional so that they're then able to communicate it to the young person.
As a principal, we used to report cases to youth protection, and but we work with youth protection because the student said it was like a caregiver. It wasn't, and they used to work with us to help the student. We work together to help the student stay in the family and household.
Yeah.
And try to get supports, other supports for the family, right? And this resonates with me because the community I'm from in Newfoundland, like when I was growing up, it's a farming community. It's one of the few farming communities, mostly all fishing communities. But I had two of my friends that were similar like this in caregiving, and the educational, how do you say that? You know, most of my friends probably got education level grade 5 or grade 6, and my background is in special education. This is why my brother has a disability. So, and at that time, my parents were in denial because they didn't want to recognize the disability. So I got into education because of that. But I see that like a couple of my friends that see the topics there, like committed suicide because of that was when I was probably 17 or 18. And I see it in the north where we're to now. So I was a principal in East Main. And because well, we're lucky compared to where Eric was to his principal, because Eric had a big school like in Chisasibi, but our school was 263 students. So like we worked hard to make sure that no student was left behind, and we had great supports put in place for the students and help the families in the community, which if you had a big school, like
It's harder to do.
you can't do it, right? It's very difficult, right?
It's a different level of trust, which is really the key here.
Yeah.
Interesting. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to kind of address, like, when a sibling in a high school is taking care of a parent. I have one thing in mind was that the parent was a drug abuser. And there was a whole family and she took care of the siblings. I'm talking about high school and her siblings were in elementary. But talking about poverty, so I've seen it more with people who have less money. So what we would do is we would call them protection. Because they're too young to be doing all of this in the home, and then youth protection would say, sorry, that you have a house over your head, you know, we're not going to do anything, and they don't. And this, but when I went to a so-called more a school with more money, there's same issues, just they're richer people, but they're able to afford some resources to help with what's going on in the system. So I think it's probably the same thing with you guys. There's not money in the system, so I think it's worse Something that we have them and then we do have the money. You have the same situation, but you have a little bit more help.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I really think that this is part of, I'm gonna go to these things, but I really think that like this whole conversation is a part of the disability justice movement. Because in terms of the poverty question, there's no clear cut example. If your disability benefits can barely sustain a single person, and then you're given a pittance on top of that to have your kids taken care of as well, of course the family struggles. And of course they can't access the professional supports that they need because they have to pay for them. And then of course these youth come in and fill those gaps. Money would make a huge difference for a lot of these families.
Plus they don't have the skills, too, right? Because I've seen where community I'm from, is a poor community. And I want to post to them, and they don't have the skills to, they don't have the money, and they don't have the skills to, because they get a very basic education.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm trying to say, but basically they don't have the skills to,
people that are disadvantaged don't have kind of the literacy with the system, or the system isn't usually built for them.
yeah,
Paradoxically, it takes a lot of learning and a very specific type of literacy to know how to navigate and get those supports. So there's a lot of barriers that way. I just want to make sure that I get to like very practical things that you can do, because I have to hate for you to leave without them. The slides will also give you international examples. If I was going to cut anything today, I wanted to cut that, because this conversation is much better than talking about, you know, what the UK is doing. We need to talk about what we can do here. So I want to talk about what you can do immediately, kind of midterm, and then long-term, what we might be able to prioritize. So the bottom line is really just being flexible and adapting to the situations that these youth are facing. And it's nothing more than the typical accommodations that you make for other students, really. Like having a personal, what are they called? Personalized support plans, and IEP, individualized education plan. I'm learning all the lingo, to be able to meet what they need to be able to succeed. Treat them like any other student that way, with the awareness and the consciousness of what the context actually is. And organizations like AMI can help give your staff that. You can work around the routine. So a big thing is favoring lunch instead of keeping students after school, because that disrupts the family routine. They have to organize transportation, all of those things. And then keeping the parents engaged, keeping in mind their sensitivity to the issue, that they might feel blamed, that they may already be stigmatized because of the condition that they or their family is living with. So it takes that sensitivity into account. I would even stress that by saying, like, I wouldn't call the student a young caregiver to the parent in the first 3 times I meet with the parent.
Would this be mediated through a caseworker?
Ideally, yeah. Ideally, I think that's great, because a caseworker, like a social worker type, like a liaison that's able to look at the entire situation and connect the dots, so that there's a point of contact that knows the full picture, instead of kind of isolated little bits of support. The small steps that we can build up to are talking about young caregivers in class, integrating this into your lessons. When you talk about citizenship, when you talk about family and belonging and society, caregiving is a huge part of that. And so integrate that so that they're getting accustomed to talking about these things. And that will be able to bridge it into where you're able to say that we can offer personalized support plans in cases where you're a caregiver, and make that really explicit. We can talk about awareness campaigns, so like postering, trying to, you know, have a presentation for parents during the National Caregiving Week, that sort of thing. I do in-class presentations on young carers, and there is the Aider sans fil avant craquer network that also does that. Most of them are French speaking, but it's something to bear in mind. They're trying, they actually are good partners. They're doing stuff in English with us. And then there's trainings for teachers and staff, a little bit like today, or something more grounded in your actual location so that we're able to like draft up some action plans and talk about what it will actually look like. And all of those kind of move us into places where I think, as well as telling the students that they're able to access accommodations, policies need to specifically say that caregiving is one of these situations where they can get those accommodations. I think that there should be trainings for staff that are kind of part of the due course. If we're equipping them to deal with youth mental health, this can be a part of that. Maybe a Pro-D day that's dedicated to this, or a presentation at a Pro-D day, start small, that sort of thing.
Are you talking about things like mental health, first aid, assist?
Yes,
Stuff for the children?
exactly, yeah.
Is there a fee associated to having the trainings offered in the schools, or it's free?
Everything that AMI-Quebec does is free. One of the things that they do in the UK is there is an identified person that is that point of contact in every school. I'm not sure if that's going to work in our context. Like, I don't know, because there's so many different school contexts here, but it's something to bear in mind, and on an individual school level, that might be how you approach it. And then we can talk about piloting services or stuff specific to the student body. It sounds like, I forget your name, but with the peer network, like talking about expanding that to young carers makes good sense. That sort of thing as a pilot project is what I hope that we're building toward. I'm going to come back to this just so that I can clarify what I offer and what AMI offers, and then we can relate it to what you can do. So you'll get these slides, and each one of these is a link. We have a resource list it's focused mostly in Montreal, but where available, I tried to find provincial services. So things like Chabad Lifeline, so young carers helping someone with addictions. There's a number, there's a place for you to refer. We have it for Alzheimer's, early onset dementia. Like, I really enumerated down the list where those specific services exist. And then where there's more generalists, like what AMI does, we address young carers in all of those contexts. We also have information packets. So there's something called a SIB kit for kids that are in a hospital setting, so that they're able to have information about the condition that their loved one lives with. A lot of the time, especially for the younger children, the family tries to kind of protect them. And what it ends up being is that they're really confused about this situation. They don't know why their sibling is going to hospital oftentimes, or why there's been such a change in behavior in a parent. And so there's information packets that really like break it down for young people, and it's in language that they can understand. I also wanted to highlight that there's a book list that was put together by the Public Libraries Association that, again, speaks to either mental health or different conditions for kids from like under 9 to right up into like YA novels that address these themes. Those are things that you could bring into a classroom for reading study. And then for services, I do workshops that kind of change depending on the month, but this month we have one for parents to really kind of onboard them, talk about what their needs are as a family, talk about what care means in different families, and try and break down some of that stigma and inform what we need to do going forward, so that those parents are allies with us and they don't feel antagonized by what we're trying to do. And then the other thing that I do is I do a workshop for 5 to 12-year-olds where we do crafts and we talk about feelings, we talk about what care means in the home and how they can kind of equip themselves and cope with this. And then we do a support group for 18 to 30-year-olds. And this list is kind of ever expanding. We're trying to find partners that are able to offer services, and then I try and fill the gaps where no one else is able to offer a service. Yeah. I wonder if there's questions about these or about, you know, what's your takeaway for today?
If we click on this page, we can get all this information.
Yes.
About the workshops and everything.
Yeah, so registration for the workshops, and then these will link to the actual resource list pages. I also have like printouts of a lot of this stuff. So the workshops and support groups. I actually have 2 like QR codes for the 2 resource lists as well. If you like.
Are the groups online?
The 2 workshops this month are in person, but the 18 to 30-year-old support group is online for now. And we're just trying to see whether people want it in person. Our services like AMI-Quebec technically serves the whole English-speaking population of Quebec, service-wise. But we are located in, or our territory is Côte-des-Neiges, NDG in Montreal. It's just a particularity because we offer English services that we've expanded that way.
But someone who's in a different community could log in and join.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, everything is free. The only barrier to entry is really just organizing it. I can propose things, or we can co-create in terms of workshops and for students or for staff. If there's information missing, I would add stuff to our resource lists or reformat it so that it really is as useful as possible.
You say workshops for students or staff, what about parents?
Yep, or for parents, yeah.
You did that workshop, one day workshop last week, I think.
Yeah, last Friday we had the symposium.
Because I'm wondering, I mean, it's not always easy to get into the education system. It's often some pretty good gatekeepers. I'm wondering, do you have a lot of pickup from attendance from educators at that?
It's an interesting kind of conundrum. Like we had a pretty good buy-in from especially the English speaking education sector. So Learn, Lester B. Pearson, like those people were all there. French speaking, it was harder to break in. And then there is interest though, like the Ministry of Education actually commissioned a study that was going to establish the prevalence of young carers in Quebec through all of the different educational levels. But even that study that's commissioned by the ministry struggled to get into the schools to measure the prevalence, right? Like it's tough. It's tough to get in, yeah. And so what it takes really is champions. It really just takes somebody saying, this is important and we can give some time to it.
I'm curious, and I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but I've been like forming it in my head this entire workshop. But do you ever encounter youth who are, let's say they need to be carers, like kind of like what we've been talking about today, like they are carers because their parents need them, or their siblings or source. But do you also encounter youth who kind of take it upon themselves and feel like they need to care for them, even though perhaps the parent, I'll use parents for an example, maybe they're ill, for example, but their child doesn't really need to be there to care for them, but because maybe they're demonstrating so much anxiety about a parent being sick that they're like, oh no, I need to be there for my parent. Like I can't go to school. I don't want to leave my parent, even though they're not actually caring for them. They don't need to be there, but they just have that like intrinsic need to like be around their parents.
You know, we adapted our definition of young carers to say they're impacted by or caring for a loved one with any of these things.
Okay.
And part of that was a choice to say that it matters if we were diagnosing this, and I hope that we never diagnose people as caregivers, to be clear, but if we were, it would be about that young person's perception of their role.
Right, yeah.
And that young person's perception of the impact on them. That's what really matters. And that's also why I think it's good that we're taking this on as kind of like a youth mental health risk. As a mental health organization, I think that it positions us well to address that impact.
like demonstrating so much empathy that it, for lack of a better term, gets in the way, like, you know what I mean? Like, it really,
Absolutely.
it doesn't enable to carry on their regular day-to-day.
Yeah, it becomes a blockage into, or maybe it's a kind of coping mechanism for them to avoid some of the things that they're dealing with. And I see that, I haven't run into that, but I have run into people in our 18 to 25 year, 18 to 30 group, who she self-described herself as a compulsive caregiver. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And she said, I realized in all of my friendships, I'm this person. In all of my my professional role, even, I've found myself in kind of a caring profession. And every one of my relationships is characterized by this. And I think it ties back to taking care of my mom when I was really young. And that to me is something to really watch out for. And one of the things that we're trying to do is help to build that self-identity outside of the caring role so that you have other things to grasp onto. That's why the social isolation, the lack of access to extracurriculars, those things are really, really important to be able to ground them and to have them have an identity other than I take care of someone else.
Yeah.
As amazing as that role is and as many strengths as it confers.
Would it be within your mandate to develop a workshop for, like, for example, for us in a particular cultural context? It's really, there's a lot of room for it.
I would love to, and I think like we have to start from there. Because I don't think that we need to just roll out like a blanket, all young carers are this. It's such a broad topic already, and then you add all of these other dimensions. Like, I want to start as particular as I can. So and it would be a co-developing thing. I would lean on you a little bit more heavily than in some other things because it needs to come from the community.
Yes, and I lean on these, you know, I'm new to the North, I've only been living there for a year and a half, so I lean on my coworkers because they've been there so long, you know, they have an understanding that I do not. So absolutely.
I said, don't shortchange it, so she has Christine has an excellent understanding. She's a very caring person. So she's she's part of our team, she's excellent.
Yeah. I think that I'm supposed to let you have lunch unless I don't want to like trap you in here with me. I will stay and talk. Or no, do we have until 12:15? Okay, it's written lunch noon on the next page, but I'm gonna take it as 12:15 if that's okay. Yeah. I'm sure they'll come get us if they need. Maybe then we can talk about, yeah, these particular interventions or particular things that you can take back or the ways that it's part of your work. Just on the language point, because I'm like a nerd for languages this way, but like in French, they talk about jeune proche.
Yes.
So just, and so it's even further removed than young carer instead of caregiver. They talk about just young close ones, I guess. It's just about proximity then.
Yeah.
And to me, that's like, it's such a it's such a destigmatizing kind of way of talking about it.
It doesn't have the weight of terror, like terror, it sounds like you're active, you're doing something, whereas caution, just you're up and here I am, found myself in proximity to this other person. It could be a friend, it could be a neighbor, it could be a family member. Caution is a very hard word to translate.
Yeah. I feel like there's kind of the three ways to approach it. Either you're reaching out directly to the young carers and making sure they have the support they need. You're reaching out to the parents so that they have some understanding of this concept. They know that you're not blaming them for anything, but that services are available. Or we are training professionals to be able to deal with these things. So there's kind of three volets to think about or actualize. Ideally all three, but it has to start somewhere.
I'm just curious that because you work with schools and the people who are in the system currently, and there are many children who might have just dropped out because of these very reasons. Is there something that you're doing with that section of the population?
Yeah. So then another modality is looking at health and social services. And again, there's two ways of looking at it. You can reach out to professionals that are dealing with the young person and their health, taking care of them. So like the young person's therapist, counselor, GP, whoever it might be that's in contact with them, making sure that they're asking the questions as well. These things. And considering what the wider context is around that youth and thinking about whether this is part of the things that they're presenting with. A lot of young carers have chronic pains. They might be in a GP's office, and unless you're asking, do you have a loved one with a disability, and are you helping them in and out of their wheelchair, or are you helping them with bathing and those things? You might not connect those dots. So that's part of the outreach we're doing. And then the other thing is working with the health professionals that are working with the person with a disability, their immediate care team. And what we ask them to do is say, look at the person that is in your office and they have all of these different needs. Look at the services they're accessing. Okay, these needs are met. Then ask about what the wider family context is. And then look at that family and who is providing the needs that the system isn't, or who is meeting those needs. If it's a single parent household and you have the mother in front of you and she has 2 teenage children, the children are probably helping to meet some of her needs as well, if she doesn't have the support that she needs elsewhere. Or if they have one older child and one much younger child, and the mom's mentioning how much trouble she's having getting that student to school, and preparing lunches, helping with homework, these things, while the older child is probably doing that. So yeah, two ways in the healthcare system. Go ahead.
Going back to what you were saying before about, things we can do, and, part of that is, of course, forming people and giving them tools to be able to, offer that assistance or to identify young carers. And I think a big part of what you do today is just that's also these asking, raising awareness, right? And if we all take something away from that, of course, that I think most of us here probably know someone that's been a carer, or maybe we've been a carer ourselves. But for me, it's the first time I hear about the notion of a young carer. So that's important. Now we have this checklist, and in one of the previous slides, we said one of the symptoms of something that's a caregiver is poor homework, or maybe like lack of attention in class. So, and somebody mentioned it, that we do with so many things, right? But just keeping in the back of mind, okay, well, maybe one of those possibilities out of the many things that it could be is that the child is a carer. The child has that extra burden of responsibility with that way. So I think just raising awareness and talking to people, naturally could come up in conversations. Once we're aware of the notion, we're more likely to go back to it and be able to recognize it more easily when you see the signs. So I think that's one of the things we could do is just keep it in the back of our mind and continue that education about what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like I've said throughout, right, like that awareness will be enough to help us address a lot of the difficulties that young caregivers go through, because the system is set up to help people, right? Like you're there to help students succeed. You have tools at your disposal to do this. This is just another subgroup of students that might need a little extra help in certain areas. Maybe I can, as you're thinking, because I know I went through a lot of things, I can come around and give you things, or you can come up and fetch papers. I have, for awareness, we have like a little poster that's bilingual, just outlining, you know, how many carers are there, what are their basic needs, these things. And then I have a flyer that is about those workshops I mentioned that are happening this month, one for parents, one for kids. And then the support group poster on the back too. And then I have two, and you're welcome to grab a good stack of these. We recently made a bookmark that just is for our young care programming. So it has our social media coordinate, the phone number, and the main link where all of the other links that I've shared with you are at AMI-Quebec.org/young-carers. Our website person is awesome and really makes it clear what you're looking for, where to get it. So that's one thing. Any questions?
Thinking that the list of books could be really useful. I'm not trained as a teacher and I've never worked in a school, but one of my projects at the Reintegration is Constellations. It's a website with books like it's Fraser-Hickson would know about it, I think. So it's a list of books, and teachers can go by theme or by author or whatever. And there's activities for each book. So I was thinking I would look at this list and I would send it to the people who put together Constellations. I don't have a lot of power. I don't power words, but I revise the texts that are sent to me. But I could suggest, you know, you might make some activities for these books so that they could be used in the schools. You know, wouldn't that be awesome if everybody could hear about it, and not just the young carers and, oh my God, there's a book about me, but even their friends who could say, oh yeah, that's a thing, that's really interesting. We just spread the word a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I would love to be able to, well, I mean, they mentioned that citizenship and
Yes.
culture course. I was like, this would be awesome content in there, you know, themes around like interdependence and who helps who in your family, how do you help in your classroom, how do you help as a citizen in your society. Like these are all, it's all the same conversation, it's all part of it. And with those responsibilities, there's certain kind of risks or challenges that come up, right?
Everyone's gonna have to go through this at some point in their life, maybe not to the extent that we're seeing here, but we are, right? Aging parents or
Yeah. The First Lady, Rosalind Carter, has a quote where she said, she's a caregiver advocate, but she says that there are only 4 types of people in the world. There's people who are caregivers, there's people who receive care, there's people who will be caregivers, and there's people who will receive care. It's, and at any, I would say like at any given point, you're probably one of those 4, right? That's right. Yes.
have a long point and tell you what I'm more going to do. We have. If it's this Saturday.
Oh, yes,
so
great.
if I could take at least like.
Grab a good little stack. I have some more in the front as well, so feel free. Yeah. There's yeah. You need probably just about twice that. Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah.
That's what I do.
Thank you. My pleasure. I definitely would like the contact all that stuff. The what do you call it? Constellation.
Words.
I think you should write it in French, because when I'm translating in English, it sounds really, really bad. It's a website. Right, so it's run by the, so it's constellation, and then you've got room that piece of but if you look up constellations books, you'll find some books about constellations, but then you'll find this website. And it has books in English and in French. Oh, that was my question. Does AMI-Quebec have a francophone counterpart, or is it bilingual?
It would be the Réseau avant de craquer, which
Réseau?
we're a part of. Réseau avant de craquer, so before,
That's-
another really hard to translate
What
thing.
an amazing title, I'm gonna write that
Yeah,
down.
I think they're changing their name currently.
Okay.
But yeah.
And I just wanted to my comment, because we also located it in G and we always try to share information.
Okay, thanks.
I don't have the areas and things and here's an area. I don't know if you want to make like organization here or there.
Yeah,
So there's a say discussion.
Why does not?
yes.
I don't,
I
I was the
haven't worked
director.
directly, nor other staff members have, but I'm definitely gonna reach out to you.
Yes, so that would be great, and then especially the session about the books. Yes.
Thank you. I'll reach out to you on here.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
I wanted
And then, I was wondering is that it's like right?
Very nice to meet you.
And, but I'm assuming that when you talk to the little ones, you have to.
Oh, you ended up. Thank you.
Right, so
Oh, no.
really on that,
Yeah.
when it comes to the little ones, it's something that we can.
I'll get this and then
No problem, and
Yeah. You're
sharing activities.
Yeah, they can phone the workers.
That we always try to, every month at least, we try to.
So your parents are from?
Strategies and activities.
They're from here, like, they moved here in the
So
60s.
maybe, you know, something like
Okay.
that.
I went, last time I went was in the 70s, I haven't been back since.
See, right?
Yeah.
Organize the-
It's a small world though.
Yeah.
Well, I'm from the Bay Roberts area, but
Really happy to.
it's all thing, I'm sure.
My great grandparents are from there.
Already? Okay. That's not community, but I just say Bay Roberts.
Yeah.
Bay Area, right? Well, it's just around. Yeah, it's
Um,
amazing.
And then, yeah, feel free.
I was
Yes, I got
to mention
Oh,
to you
yes.
that, we had permission to,
Yeah.
translate, it's called CMAC books in carpentry, textbooks.
Okay.
The organization,
Yeah.
we work with get the vocational textbook,
Well.
because again, it's permission to translate. Is that something that you do or?
We don't honestly check those. Often what will happen, it will be translated by the company, and before they're published, they'll come to us. Maybe 10 or 15% of the book, they use Google Translate, or, you know, it's
Yeah.
really badly done, and could be redone.
Yeah.
And
Just want to
but we
thank
don't.
you.
have-
So wonderful. Thank you so much. That was
We'll
really,
publish them in English.
you know,
and
I
they will
thought it
find
was
the translation.
fascinating because.
Okay, so it's not like, okay, I understand.
It would be-
You know, and I did teach for
Yeah.
many, many years, and if we don't name things,
Yeah, yeah.
then we don't
Use a
investigate
program,
them. Like you know, it's at the back of your mind, but it's not on your list.
Yeah.
And so it's so nice, like the young carers or the jeune profession,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
because naming
They
it
say
will
that,
make
I don't
us
know, but they say
be more
that's.
cognizant, you know,
Pretty
we'll
good.
look at it.
Yeah.
So that was just wonderful.
Yeah.
And I used to say
I-
that.
Yeah.
We'll turn a phrase that's really good.
Yes.
Something that's really culturally grounded. I have a colleague
Yeah.
that,
Pretty reliable.
Yeah. it's,
he's just coming back to work after
Seems to be pretty good.
this project he wants to
I
do
asked,
is about
French teacher,
indigenous
Okay.
concepts
if it's good, and they say it's
and
pretty.
partnerships with
accurate.
indigenous
Pretty accurate,
communities.
yep.
to talk
But like you
about
say, we do Google Translate.
How do you conceptualize what caregiving
It's
is?
not- it's
And
not
I'm
quality.
really kind of at a point with
Yeah.
on it, because I think that
And they
it
have
should
other
be a
languages. You know,
Yeah.
even other
led
languages.
thing, or I think that it would make good sense to.
Is your contact
Nice to
info
meet
on?
you.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll see you around again.
Yeah,
Are you here
that's
tomorrow?
okay.
No, they could only send one person, so if they'll send me today and my colleague tomorrow.
So, yeah, we obviously, we have to take
It was
time
good
and,
to see you.
you know, discuss it with colleagues, but for sure. Very, very interesting.
Thank you very much, Oliver.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comments too. They all think of this.
You got a great team there and
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. So he could see the. We, I'm ready, guys? Gotta go for lunch. Thank you very much. Excellent.
That was great. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Eric.
Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry, we're starting a few minutes late. Thank you for being here for this session on literacy, social reintegration for vulnerable youth and intergenerational connections. My name is Celine Cooper, and I'm very pleased to serve as the moderator for today's session. So what I will do, I will read through all of the biographies and introduce everybody all at once, and then you'll come up individually to do your presentations. So it is my pleasure to start with Asha Dixit, who will be presenting on early literacy development through libraries and community partnerships. Asha Dixit is the executive director of the Fraser-Hickson Institute, Montreal, leading their flagship Mini Biblioplus project. She holds an MA in Development Studies from the University of Sussex, UK. She is passionate about fostering community partnerships to promote early literacy development and bringing the joy of books and reading to children and families across Quebec. She loves to read, paint, and spend time with her family in her spare time. And next, we will have Adrienne Winrow and Natalie Bergeron. We'll be presenting on Street School, an innovative community-based approach to social reintegration for vulnerable youth. A graduate of Concordia's political science program, Adrienne Winrow has been involved in community work for over 2 decades. Her professional experience ranges from working with special needs students as a language tutor, running mom and tot programs at a Maison de la Famille, and building the capacity of Y4Y Quebec as its executive director. Nathalie Bergeron is the coordinator et le regroupement des écoles de la rue accréditées du Québec. And our third presentation, Fostering Intergenerational Connections and Experiential Learning Through Community Gardening. We have 2 speakers, Andrea Sparcea. Have I pronounced that correctly? Thank you. And Jessica Di Bartolo Rouillet. Yeah. I'm sorry. Andrea holds a bachelor's degree in criminology, complemented by a certificate in urban planning from the Université de Montréal. Over the last 6 years, she's been actively engaged as a community worker. Through her contributions to organizations such as Prevention Côte des Neiges NDG, the Eva Marston Center, and Interling, Andrea has been committed to providing vital support to marginalized older adults. Her focus lies on individuals facing social isolation, financial challenges, and includes a special emphasis on immigrant and LGBTQ+ older adults. Jessica has been working as a community worker for over 8 years now. She began at Dawson College, where she successfully completed a comprehensive 3-year program in community recreation and leadership training. This program provided her with the necessary skills to seamlessly transition into her career within the field. Over the years, Jessica has gained valuable experience working with individuals spanning all age groups. She's currently the director of the West Haven Elmhurst Community Recreation Association. This community center, located in the NDG area, offers recreational programming for all ages and aims to meet the community needs. So thank you and welcome to you all. We have 75 minutes for this session. It will run until 2:45, 15 minutes per presentation. So I'll be over sort of in the corner, keeping the time. Okay. Asha, you're up.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Asha Dixit, and I'm the Executive Director of the Fraser-Hickson Institute. We run the Mini Biblioplus project, which is an early learning initiative, working with children between 0 and 8 years and their families. Fraser-Hickson was the oldest established library in Montreal in 1885, and it has innovated through years. It started out with a mission to provide free access to knowledge and books. And we continue that mission today by providing free access to books and animation services to children and the families. So that's about the Institute and that's about me. But let's get on to business now. Let's talk about what is the need for literacy. So literacy development is one of the most pressing concerns that Canada is facing today. In a study conducted in 2013 by the OECD, placed that almost half of adult Canadians face literacy challenges, and they do not read to the level of a high school student. Also, in 2021, the Fond de Solidarité, FTQ, conducted a study and published the results saying that 2.5 million Quebecers today face challenges in literacy. So that's the challenge that we are facing currently in literacy. There was a recent study conducted by Deloitte in collaboration with the Canadian Children's Literacy Foundation, and they identified that around 30% of students at age 6 are not reading at their grade levels. And this number increases to 40% for children who come from vulnerable communities and who come from low-income households. So unfortunately, it is proven that if at age 6, you're not able to read at your grade level, you're falling behind. And it's very difficult to catch up in school and in late adulthood. So this is a grave concern that is facing Canada today. Unfortunately, these gaps that are identified, can be attributed to the lacks or the gaps in early learning opportunities provided to children. So this is about why literacy is so essential. But what is literacy and early literacy? So literacy is not just about learning to read and write. Literacy is more than that. Literacy is about the ability, the confidence, and the willingness to engage with printed and written information, and your ability to communicate that information in meaningful ways in everyday life. Early literacy comes much before that. Early literacy is when a child learns about reading and learning even before they start reading and learning. So these skills are developed between the ages of 0 and 5. Remember that 5 is the age that the child enters school. So these skills are developed even before that. And what are these skills around early literacy? So recognizing alphabets, recognizing sounds, recognizing words, recognizing how to hold a board book, how to turn pages, how to sit and just look at a picture, identify what that picture is, identify the word that identifies that picture. So these are the skills that children have to develop. So what exactly is the suitable place for developing these skills in children? So children between 0 and 5, right? Where are they? So they are at home, they are in daycares. So these are the two prominent places where these skills need to be developed in children. And studies show that by the time they reach 5 years of age, 90% of their brain is already developed. They form those connections about what is the name of this object? How does this object look? What is the corresponding word that identifies this object? So this is the age range that is very important wherein you start developing these skills. So that is where we come in. That is where we come in, and we work through the Mini Biblio Plus project. So what do we do in our project activities? So we are a library, but we are no longer open to the public. So we work through the outreach model with partners who have access to children between 0 and 5 and their families, 0 and 8 and their families. So we start out by setting up mini biblios. This term means, mini biblio means mini libraries. Mini libraries consist of books between 50 to 200. And these books are based on the themes provided by the partners. So they can go according to seasons or something special they're celebrating, or some particular festival they're celebrating. And we give them these books, and they can keep those books at their location and lend them out to the children and the parents at their location. And this set of book is constantly and periodically refurbished. We also provide them with trained volunteers. So we recruit volunteers, we train them in early learning, early literacy, and train them to read to children. And they go into these daycares and they read to children once a week or once a month, depending on the needs of the daycare. We also facilitate, so there comes a component of on the education of parents and educators and caregivers. So we facilitate early literacy development workshops for parents. In these workshops, we explore what is early learning, what is early literacy, and we also empower them with skills to read to children more at home and create that environment around books and learning at home. At the daycare, we empower the educators with a comprehensive knowledge around early literacy, the theory behind it. What else can they do at the daycare? How can they incorporate books into their daily routines? How can they set up an environment at the daycare that prioritizes books and reading and the joy of books? We also create and share early literacy resources to support educators and parents in integrating early literacy activities into their daily lives. So these resources could include Book of the Month, wherein we pick up a book and we prepare a lesson plan around the book. We prepare activities around the book. It could go into crafts, arts and crafts around this book. So the educators, because we know they're already overloaded and overwhelmed, they have to just pick up this book plan. They have this book in the classroom, and then they execute the plan in their classroom with the book and the activity. So everything is ready. We also provide activities that explore all dimensions of learning, right? For example, if you see at that, look at the picture there, we have Anna, she's our programs assistant, and she's actually executing an activity that we planned that was planned for outdoors in a park. So this kind of combines the physical motor skills, the book, the reading, the language, the fact of being outdoors. So for children, the books are not limited just to the household or just to the classroom where they sit and read. It's not a regimented process. It is a process wherein you go outside, you explore your environment with a book in your hand. So that is something that we want to set that culture. So we also actively participate in community events and other community programming. So for example, we bring in the literacy dimension in all other kinds of programming. For example, PEP, who is one of our partners, they do community kitchens. So it is a community kitchen. You wouldn't think about books in a community kitchen, but then we do. We bring in books at the community kitchen. We give away books for children to take back home. So we are putting books in children's hands. And we have a volunteer who reads to children at that event. So children are now going into this event, which has something to do with food and cooking, but there are books too. There are other events or other programming that we contribute to. For example, there's Papa et Moi, that's run by Bienvenue NDG. So in this program is all about fostering positive relationship between the father and the children, getting the father more active into the children's lives. But then we said, what better way to make a father more active in a child's life than reading to the child, right? So then we bring that in. And also we contribute to a network of partners and other like-minded organizations to advocate for prioritizing early literacy development at the policy level. So we work very closely with Canadian Children's Literacy Foundation to advocate for literacy and policy around literacy by writing letters to people in power to advocate for early literacy. This year, we have started working with a few partners across Quebec who work with the English-speaking population. And we are trying to help them. This is a pilot project. We are trying to help them develop and create their own early literacy and learning programming for the families in their community. The best way to explain this is through an example, because we don't have a set programming right now, because every partner is different and they have unique needs. So we are working with MIPEG to actually, they already had an established library, but it was only for adults. So we came in and said, well, you have the space, you have the ability, so let's add a children's library also to your library. And they told us that we're already struggling with this library. So then we said, don't worry, then let's do one thing. Let's put you in touch with our librarian who is managing a big children's library, and he can help you out, or you can consult with him to, set up your, or organize your library much better. And then they wanted to also do workshops for parents in their communities around learning and around reading. So then what we did is we tried the train the trainer approach, wherein our staff then trains their staff to actually facilitate those workshops for their community. So it's not us going and doing the things there. We are empowering the community to do what they think is important for their community. So this is our impact. So we have 178 total partners and we have 60 active volunteers, some reading to children, some helping out in the library, some delivering books. We have 11,600 books in circulation and around 22,000 books in the library, including the 11,600. And around 17,000 participants benefit from our programming, and we have facilitated 8 parent workshops this year. So these are the few testimonials from our partners. For example, this particular partner opens up their mini biblio for the parents at their location to borrow books and take back home and to read to their children. And this is an early literacy workshop that we did with the parents. They were surprised to learn that they should be learning to children even when they are pregnant. So this is something that, so the main idea that we want to drive out there is read to your children. The parents read to their children, educators read to children at the daycare. Surround your life with books wherever you go. And that reading doesn't have to start at 6 months or at 1 year. Because there are a few parents who think, oh, my baby is just 6 months old. Will I benefit from this workshop? In my mind, I'm like, you're 6 months a bit late to come into this workshop. So you should have been here when the baby was 0 months old, or even in your belly, actually. So the message is very simple: read to children, but it's confused, and there's a lot of confusion around this message as to, oh, does my child have to start reading when they're 3 years old? No, it's not about the child starting to read. You read to children to build their competencies, and then they can start learning to read when they go to school. So that's it. That's the presentation.
Thank you, Celine, for the kind introductions at the beginning. I realize I take full responsibility. I think I sent Natalie's biography a little too late for it to get included in your list or your printout. So I will do the job of introducing my co-presenter, Nathalie Bergeron. Nathalie has worked in autonomous community action for over 36 years. She has worn several hats throughout her professional career. Initially, she was a day camp theater and improvisation facilitator for teenagers and children. Subsequently working with young people, young adults, and adults in several contexts such as youth centers, community work and public housing, day evening centers, distribution of injection and inhalation equipment, reintegration programs with dropouts, and people experiencing homelessness, sobering up centers, and others. One thing led to another. Natalie held management positions within community organizations such as leisure centers, therapy centers, coordinator, and clinical supervisor, and social street workers. Among the years of professional experience, there are 14 years working with people experiencing homelessness. She holds a baccalaureate in drama, a certificate in drug addiction, and a master in drug addiction intervention. Since 2020, she is the coordinator of the RERAC, the Regroupement des Écoles d'Arrêt Activités du Québec, that we'll present today. This is a provincial group that promotes, consolidates, and develops street schools. Thank you, Nathan. You're welcome. Okay. Okay, so thank you for being here and joining us. Thank you, Fraser-Hickson, for opening the floor, and it's nice to be following close colleagues. So oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's no mic. Too quiet. Okay, so our presentation is called Street School, which is a rough translation of Les Écoles de la Rue, which is an autonomous community organization model that is becoming popular in the French-speaking community of Quebec. So we call this talk an innovative community-based approach to social reintegration for vulnerable youth. I'm co-presenting with Nathalie from the RERAC. Won't bore you with this. We're going to talk. Okay. So I'm from Youth for Youth Quebec. We are a nonprofit organization. We're youth-led. We consider ourselves to be fairly grassroots because we create projects and initiatives that allow young people to take leadership roles in their communities with micro initiatives and engaging their peers, as well as larger projects of greater scale. But the point is that we're for youth by youth. We have a mandate to consult with English-speaking youth and represent the issues that they raise to government when the when the occasion arises. Another word about Wi-Fi Quebec that's important for this talk is that we have had success over the years in reaching a certain part of the English-speaking youth population. And generally, it's those who are already able, open to, and willing to engage in leadership style activities. And that's not everybody. That leaves out a whole bunch of young people who are experiencing vulnerabilities of various kinds, marginalization of various kinds. And so we consider that a weakness of our organization, actually. We have to do more to reach out to youth who are in tougher situations and don't have the bandwidth to come out to engage in leadership activities. We know about these young people from our partnerships in the community, and I'll get to that in a minute. Nathalie.
Thank you very much. So, regroupement des écoles de la Université du Québec. So my name is Nathalie Bergeron, and Adrienne introduced me very well. So the organization exists since 2014. English is not my first language, so I'm sorry. And my English is a little bit rusty. So we create this organization to give a distinct voice for the École de la Rue, visibility and presence to close to government, decision-making, and community organization. And we are the privileged interlocutor with the Ministère de l'Éducation for the École de la Rue. And we are member of the Coalition Intergen and the RQACA, that it means Réseau Québécois d'Action Communautaire. I don't know if we can translate it in English.
The Rocage?
No,
c'est pas le Rocage?
C'est pas le Rocage, no.
Oh, so many acronyms. I can't translate that.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. All right, okay. Thank you, Nat. I will pass the mic back to you in a moment, but I just want to talk a little bit about what brought Y4Y to this model and to this concept. We kind of stumbled upon it, but we were engaged with La Coalition Intergen. They are an umbrella organization that kind of is a network organization for many youth groups, youth-focused groups in Quebec. And they put out an annual report, at least one a year. Last year's theirs is called L'Action Communautaire Autonome Jeunesse et la Réussite Éducative des Jeunes. Of course, we were interested in what they had to report. One of the things they reported on was the success of the École de la Rue. And I'm often in the habit of asking a silly question in a given room that I'm in. And my silly question was, what's an École de la Rue? I never heard of that before. And because, you know, among our staff and our board of directors, all of whom are young people, with the exception of myself, we do have a fairly good knowledge of the initiatives that are being undertaken in our community. And yet I was sure I'd never heard of École de la Rue before, and nor had any of my colleagues. We asked Nathalie if she would come and speak with us. So not only did she meet with me, but she met with our board of directors, presented everything that we needed to know in the most 101 sense about École de la Rue. And we decided to ask around. We went to learn. We went to other partners in the community to see if anyone else had awareness of this model of education that's based in the community first. We did some of our own research based on publicly available knowledge about the many programs and initiatives in our own community that are aimed at addressing the issue of vulnerable youth at risk of dropping out of school, or youth who already have dropped out of school. And there are too many to name. I tried to fit them all on it, I couldn't. So, I mean, in various school boards, there are, you know, nurturing support centers. They've created task forces. You know, we're adding special needs classrooms. We've got Adult Ed, Rock Ed, that aims to gear educational programs to the needs of the individual, which is so important, and a feature of the École de la Rue as well. You know, we have work-oriented training pathways, literacy organizations, other community orgs that are running programs and initiatives that may be long-term or may only be precariously funded, but they're still aiming to address this problem of youth who are dropping out and who are becoming completely disaffiliated from our society and our social fabric. So it's not to say there aren't initiatives in our community. There are, but I was pretty sure after the work that we did, talking to our community partners, as well as school board reps, and with Natalie and her colleagues, that there was nothing quite like École de la Rue. So that's why we're here today. We thought it was important to eliminate this idea. If you had never heard of it before, an opportunity to ask more questions of Natalie. What we do know at Y4Y Quebec from our work over the years, working directly with youth in the communities where they live across the province, we know the reasons why you struggle in school. They range from complex family structure, little support at home, financial precarity, mental health issues are becoming I don't know if they're more prominent or if we're just talking about them more effectively, which is good. They're experiencing bullying to an a terrifying degree. They have responsibilities beyond their years at home that they can, more than they can cope with. We know that in Canada, there are too many youth who leave school without a diploma. There are 300,000 youth per year who are at risk of dropping out of high school in Canada. That's a shocking number. It's under-recognized by our population in Canada. The same can be said of Quebec. There are too many dropouts in Quebec. There are too many dropouts in our English-speaking community. All that to say that in addition to the fact that our community infrastructure in the English-speaking community in Quebec, as hard as everyone's working, we don't have the same amount of programs and services in our community as they do in the French-speaking community, particularly for at-risk youth. That's just a true statement. We know it to be true. We're constantly trying to find ways to get projects to build the infrastructure up. There are entire organizations devoted to this, but there's room for more, and they're doing things in the French-speaking community and getting funding for it. That sometimes maybe we should be taking advantage of that funding too. So that's it. That's why we're here, and thank you for listening to that. I'm going to pass it to Nathalie. She's going to talk about the realities of École de la Rue and why it's quite unique. Thanks.
Thank you, Adrienne. So we'll go back in the days, the origin of the École de la Rue. We go back to the mid-90s. In Quebec City, in Montreal, there is an increase in violent interaction between youth who live in the street and the police. So there was a lot of violence, of anger in the street. And the organization who work with the people, the young who live in the street, ask them what happened, why you are still in the street, why you don't go to school, what happened? So they said, I can't go to school because I don't have any address. I can go to school because I have problem in my life. I can go to school because the way I look, they don't want us in the school. So they said, okay, so you don't have access to studies, so project for youth emerged. So in Montreal, l'organisme dans la rue, POPS, maybe you heard about POPS, creates the École Emmett Jones in 1997, and in Quebec City, La Maison Dauphine in 1998 create a school for youth from the street. This is the definition of the École de la Rue that we found in the website of the Ministry of Education. So it's a secondary level education offered to people, a population age 16 and over, who do not fit into the regular school system. They have psychosocial support integrated into schooling. Activities, workshop offered in a living environment promotes personal knowledge, discovery, and social integration. A schooling activity aimed at harm reduction, problem solving, development of social skills, acquisition of skills of employment and studies, and popular education activities, the site visits, cultural and sport leisure activities. And the concept in the L'école de la rue fait du rattrapage citoyen post-scolaire. I don't know how to translate in English.
Not just adherence, once again, or reuptake of schooling, but also citizenship and reintegration, reinsertion to society.
Yeah, reinsertion to society. Okay, so it's like a leitmotiv in for the École de la Rue. So we are the autonomous community organization, so we respond to the changing needs of the population they serve. So we change in front of the population, they come, not the reverse. Yeah. The approach is centered on the development of the autonomy and the responsibility, and the cornerstone of the concept is the voluntary commitment of the people. If they are in the École de la Rue, it's because they want to be there. It's not a law, it's not an obligation or something like that. If you want to come, come. And the philosophy is an unconditional welcome, voluntarism, harm reduction, and pedagogy of valorization. And the pact The PAC is a programme d'action communautaire sur le terrain de l'éducation. It's a program from the Ministère de l'Éducation. You have 200, I always mix 100 and 1,000, so I have to 218 autonomous community action organization recognized by the MEQ are funded through PAC. We have 4 categories of action: dropout prevention, literacy, continuing education, and École de la Rue. And now we have 10 Écoles de la Rue around the Quebec. Oh, a personal surprise. We have it in Rimouski, Rivière-du-Loup, Lévis, Longueuil, 2 in Montreal, North Montreal. We have Shawinigan, Victoriaville, and Drummondville. The profile of the population, the range age is 25 to 30 years old, and average level of schooling on arrival at École de la Rue is first cycle of secondary, with majority of first secondary is like 7 and 8 grades. We have a lot of demand for pre-secondary education on the rise. Most disaffiliated population with major problems report and need to belong. They have lost a sense of meaning in their life, and they are in search of one. In 2019-2020, we have to collect all the intervention they did in around the École de la Rue, and it's 4,950 interventions. So in that number, 80% is respond to personal problem and 20 regarding schooling. So that means that the real problem of their person is personal problem. And we are working around that problem. So after that, they can more ability to do your schooling. So at the beginning, there are a lot of people from the street, but it's changing right now. So young people with delinquency problem are still present, but they no longer represent the majority as before. Mental illness has become more prominent. We have multiple diagnoses such as bipolarity, depression, psychosis, and anxiety disorder. And learning disability, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and the ASD problem, autism syndrome.
Yes, thank you, Nat.
Welcome.
So just as a few final thoughts, thank you, Nathalie, for coming all this way to present and deliver that information. All I wanted to say was that I think what was special to me, in my opinion, what drew me to this concept, this model, is that is kind of in response to what we've heard from youth on the ground. The École de la Rue model allows youth to walk into a welcoming environment in almost any state and at any stage in their life path. It allows them to define their own goals and milestones to get further along the way towards those goals, whatever they may be. For École de la Rue to succeed, they have to be part of the ecosystem working towards this common goal. They have to work with school boards, because that's where the teachers come from that provide the 15 to 20 hours of instruction every week in the École de la Rue. They have to work with the Adult Ed Center, the Vocational Education Center, the local literacy center, because if someone's not ready to go to École de la Rue because we have a low literacy level, they go there. They become part of that ecosystem. And some of them have waiting lists because there are kids who know that that's where they'll fit and there's nowhere else. And they'll never walk back through the doors of the school, according to these young people. So likewise, looking to support orgs who wish to pilot this model down the road. In fact, we're looking at funding right now to study how this could be implemented in our own community with willing partners, obviously, where there's a need, obviously, and then to go forward in whatever way the organizations, many of whom are already functioning somewhat like this model, they would like to access the funds that are available and that are being taken advantage of in with our French-speaking partners in our community. We think there's a way to go forward. We know there's a need, and we've gotten confirmation from our partners in the community who also have this as their primary goal in their careers in their life, to help these youth who have dropped out. that this would be a model that would be very interesting for some of the young people that are in this situation. So we're looking for partners. I visited 3 Écoles de la Rue, Drummondville, Lévis, Shawinigan most recently, and I was at their forum recently with all of the Écoles de la Rue. I can tell you it's a fascinating model run by amazing people who are so dedicated. And I really think it could work for some of our youth too. So thank you to the organizers, QUESCREN. Thank you for everyone for listening to this presentation.
Hello, I'm Andrea Garcia. I'm with the Eva Marsden Center, and my colleague is Jessica de Bartolo-Rouillet. She's the director of the West Haven Elmhurst Community Recreation Association, but we'll be calling it the West Haven Community Center just for short. So today we're presenting a project which aimed to foster intergenerational connections and experiential learning through community garden. So there were a number of partners on this project, but the main 2 were the Eva Marsden Center. The Eva Marsden Center is an organization that works mainly with lower income older adults in the Montreal West, but mostly NDG area. And then I'll let Jessica talk more about the West Haven Community Center. She's the director. So I'll let you talk about that. We'll be going through the project, the different steps, and then I'll come back to the benefits and why this type of project is relevant.
All right, so hello everyone, Jessica. So I'm the director of the West Haven Community Center located in Notre-Dame-la-Classe, Copenhagen as well. So we're located in a very small part of NDG, a quite isolated part of NDG as well, on bordering Montreal West, bordering a lot of commercial area, and also we also have commercial, industrial, and we have beautiful train tracks bordering us on the back side. So as you can, if anyone knows community, those are some very big boundaries to uphold. We are also a very Anglo-allophone part of NDG. NDG is very Allo and allophone. However, this is a very specific part of NDG where there's a lot of newcomers because of the housing that tends to be in our neighborhood. The amount of people in the neighborhood is quite high because they are apartment buildings primarily. There's one house probably in the neighborhood that seems very out of place. And people come kind of on rotation in the neighborhood because the housing situation is not great. There's 1 or 2 landlords that own most of the housing and it's not well maintained. Therefore, we have the population rotating every 2 to 5 years, with some exceptions of people staying for a longer period of time. So one thing to note is there's a lot of newcomers, a lot of boundaries with language as well, and poverty that comes with that. And we do work with, I like to say all populations, but I would say 6 to 110. We don't work a lot with the 0 to 5-year-olds. So this is part of our community center. These pictures are all of our community center. So we do a project every year with, well, every year, started 2 years ago, so annually now, with many organizations. And we have a beautiful community space now in the neighborhood, and we're trying to get more implication on the ground with multiple generations. And so we have a community garden. And so we created this program with the Eva Marsden Center and WIN, which is the West and Intergenerational Network. Sorry, another abbreviation. So we did this project, we do this annually, and we bring together multiple types of groups to help us plant for our community. We're going to talk about the implementation too, how we implemented this project, the benefits, which Andrea talked about, and then just a little conclusion. So the project, so this is part of our garden. We have these beautiful wooden backs that are given to us by the city of Montreal, but without anything in it, with a lot of soil, with a whole bunch of rocks in it. So we had to come up with a solution. And of course, since we work with a lot of kids, so the 0 to the 6 to 12-year-old population. So we decided to implement our little kids in helping with the space Again, we're going to talk about it, but West Haven is a food desert as well. So there is not a very big access to food in our neighborhood. And we do have a great marché at the corner of the street. However, still very expensive. You can imagine how much the prices are, and grocery stores are not very close by. So we thought, especially in the summertime, having access to fresh fruits, vegetables, beautiful flowers, would help our population. So it was located in front of the West Haven Community Center. As I said, we do it annually in May. We're always looking for volunteers if ever anyone wanted to come by next year. For the 2 years, we worked with the Edinburgh School, which is not in NDG, it's actually in Côte Saint-Loup, no, Montreal West, sorry, who's a great school. We had, the first year we had the grade 1s, 2s, and 3s come, and this year we had the grade 4s and 5s come, grade 4, 5, 6. We had about 20 students from Edinburgh come. We also had Loyola students, so Loyola High School is right in back of our community center. So we were lucky enough to have about 10 Loyola boys as well, both years come out, and seniors from the Eva Marsden Center. So there was quite a variety of people. We were about 40 to 50 people working on these gardens. We also partnered up with WIN and the Depot. So the Depot in Côte-des-Neiges and DG works more with the gardening aspects, with the food security. So we wanted to bring them in to help with the planting. Of course, none of us are experts in that aspect as well, but we wanted to make sure that we were planting what was great for the community, what would actually grow in this type of bin. So we brought in the Depot. And I guess a little reason, we're going to talk about the benefits, but a little reason why we wanted to do this. My aim for the center was to bring older adults and youth together in something that would benefit the neighborhood. And Andrea and I love to work together in intergenerational aspects. So it was a great place for exchange, not only for the gardening aspect, but in knowledge and skill sharing. So how did we do it? So we prepped the activity in advance. In the first time, obviously, it was a little test run. There was a lot of prepping and planning with the other organizations. We had the space, we had the equipment, we had some of the kids, but we did involve WIN and the New Hope bus, if any of you know that, to get the kids to our center. Again, there's a big boundary of getting them there, so it was very cool. We hosted this event. It's a full day, well, half a day, sorry, event where we get the youth, get everyone into the building. We do a little presentation on why we're here, why we're bringing them together. And then we split up the group. Obviously, 50 people in one space, gardening is a lot. So we split up the youth, not the youth, just everyone. We split them up into groups. So there was about 2 youth and an older adult in each little group. And they would be planting and also having a conversation about why we're doing this. What is the reason why we need this in our community? So then they would switch, and it would be, they'd all have the experience of planting and learning about why it's important to do this type of activity. And then we would also provide a lunch where they can further mingle and get to know each other and learn from one another. The growth and maintenance, obviously, one day you plant and then you kind of leave. Our center then was in charge, and with some seniors and some other people coming back to water, but our 6 to 12-year-olds were the ones maintaining the garden throughout the whole summer during our summer camp. So it was something that continued, even if they were not the ones who planted it, they got to see the growth, and we would send pictures to also the seniors at the Eva Marsden Center to see their growth. And then we harvested it during our summer and during the fall, early fall. And I would cook the beans that they grew. I would give them the one fruit, one vegetable that grew, and you had to see their faces when they got these things. It was magical.
So I'll talk about a little bit about the benefits. So I split them into 3. So we have the youth, the older adults, and the community as a whole. So for the youth, the biggest component was the education and the skill development. So in the way the event was set up, there was the discussion, and we went into food systems, food security, food deserts. So it's all concept that may be new for the youth. And with the workshop led by the Depot, there was a lot of skills. So how do you prepare the soil? How do you sow the seeds? How do you maintain a garden? And then they actually got to practice those skills by planting. That was, you know, that was, there were these 2 steps, and also another component of education came from the older adults themselves, which a lot of them had gardens, had a lot of experience, had a lot of stories to share. So that was also something that they could provide, and that the youth learned from during the planting and during the discussion. And then another benefit that we've observed is, we called it environmental awareness and responsibility. I've said it during the discussion, there was the whole discussion about the food desert and why we were planting at that specific center at that specific moment. And by planting, I think the kids really got this, there was this understanding of why it was relevant to build this garden and how it would benefit the whole community. So there was this aspect. And then for the youth from the after school program who maintained the garden during the whole summer, there was also this awareness of how you could have an impact on your community and how you could impact the green spaces and what the benefits would be long term. For the older adults, I'm the animator of that group, and just to give you a little information of that on that group, it's the older adults 70 plus. We have some older adults who are in early stages of dementia, some mobility issues. There's a lot of social isolation, and we're talking about people who are all lower income, so it's a group with specific needs. I think one of the main things that the older adults could take from this activity was the social connection. Throughout the activity, there were so many opportunities to share, to laugh. I think also one of the things that I remember the older adults telling us is, we're so grateful that the kids came to us. There was a positive attitude. During lunch too, there was so much curiosity, and that is something that maybe the older adults, especially that group, don't really have in their everyday and don't really have in the activities that they usually participate in. Then I've mentioned it before, we have the knowledge transfer. That was something that the older adults could, had the opportunity to do throughout the different activities. And that was very special. And then I've mentioned it before, the older adults, some of them are in early stages of dementia. So to get out of the center of the regular programming that we have, and to be able to participate actively in this type of activity where they like touch the soil and they interact with the youth, was also beneficial, sorry. Yeah. And then for the community as a whole, you could see in the pictures, there's the mural, and then in front of it, you have all these beautiful, like, back with vegetables and herbs growing. So there's this big aspect of community beautification for the people who are participating in the center's activities. It's something very welcoming when you come into the center, but also for the residents of the West Haven area, it's a very important aspect. And to be able to have this project created, maintain it, and then harvest, there is a big aspect of community building and of collective pride. I think you've seen it with the kids at the center, and I've kept my older adults, my group, I've sent them pictures, I've showed them how everything is growing, and even though they can't always, because there are some mobility issues, they can't necessarily go to the center and see how everything's growing, but just to know that they've contributed to their community in this way is something that they've told me was very special. And then Jessica mentioned before, some of the food was taken by the residents, and then some of the food was taken, was used in the after school program. So there's also that potential for being a local food source, which is also a benefit for the whole community. And just to conclude, here are some of our older, and that's lettuce, beautiful lettuce, very lush, and hot peppers.
Well, we did have peppers. We had a whole variety of fruits and vegetables this year. That was the different aspect, and it grew wonderfully. And these are some of this is one of the people from the depot, and then some of our older adults, elementary school and high school aged kids.
So just to conclude, we had this project as a way to bring these two generations together, but I think this type of project also has the potential to bring a lot of partners together and just overall to strengthen a community like West Haven. So there's a lot of potential there. That's it. Yeah.
Thank you all for those were really inspiring presentations. I feel like we need that. That was really wonderful. Thank you for sharing those. We have about 15 minutes for questions. I know Debbie, you had a question that you wanted to raise.
It was answered, thank you.
It was answered. Okay. 15 minutes for questions. If there's anything, yes.
A question about the community garden, all the materials, seeds, everything like that. And did you see that I'm doing it from the table, or did you want to purchase anything? Or was it mostly funded? It was, well, no, there was no funding, no funding for the project. The first year we did get a large donation from one of the local local tax shop. And then the second year, the depot did come on board to help with some of the planting. You're not a very well, I did have to buy a little bit of things, but it was like overall, the lunch was the most expensive thing, and it was on just like a big thank you for the community. So it wasn't very expensive. We did have the soil that we kept clean throughout the years. So as we go on, there will be getting back, like we have some of the seeds from this year to replant. So it'll sustain itself over time.
Who took care of it during the summer?
Our kids and myself as
Oh, you
well.
had a camp.
I had to, yeah, we had a camp, and then during the early stages of this year, we also have an after school program. So I would get the kids, I would send out my coordinator with the kids, and I would help clean it up as well. I get some kids to help pull out weeds, so we were teaching them as well, our local kids, how to maintain it. It was amazing.
Because I know in one of our schools, we have a 4-H club, as they used to call them, and the older kids, and they would go in and take care of it during the summer while the kids weren't there, because they were all bussed in, so it was very hard for them to come in just for that. So they were there in the summertime, and in August, when they came back to school, whoa, they got some tomatoes and whatever.
And it did help, I think, because we do work with 2 schools that don't come necessarily during the school year, but because we have access to our kids who are there, and it's a different group, it was a great learning opportunity for them to also understand. And it was their families who would be coming in and using the fruits and vegetables that we had.
So the kids that you're working with, the kids from Edinburgh and like, they're not our community necessarily. It's hard for us because the schools that we do work with are not our biggest partners. And so it's harder for us to reach out to those. However, we do implement them in. But it's a good opportunity for those kids in those other communities, those are better off or more well-off communities to understand the realities of society. They're gonna encounter it at some point.
It is part of, and Loyola does come in there. We have students who volunteer for our after school program and things like that. So we do have a connection with Loyola. Edinburgh, not so much, but they do come from Anglo schools, whereas our kids do not. Most are new immigrants. They are forced to go to elementary schools that are French. So it's, it's a nice boundary that also gets crossed with these a little bit more well-off students who come from different backgrounds that are our little kids.
It's a linguistic and intergenerational.
Exactly. They're both of even our organizations all work very Anglo-Allophone communities, even Marsden as well. So it's very cool to be working with so many different people in this type of project.
There was a question back here, and then I see another one over there.
It's for the project as well. I actually used to be the former director at West Haven, and I wanted to ask, since you mentioned that this project didn't have any funding, and it ran as a pilot project, I imagine. So is there space, because being funded also very heavily by the city of Montreal, is there space for you to negotiate within the budget or like get that kind of support for you to either expand or make sure that it, you have you as a director, but also the coordinators, like the proper compensation to actually carry out the project more than just the pilot stage?
Unfortunately,
I don't see that being, something that the city will, like, to them, they've already contributed to the project by allowing us these beautiful bins, which are not well maintained, just generally, and the soil. However, like, we do work with the city of Montreal very closely. Our one person, our alliance from the city, she bought us some of the stuff from her own pocket to contribute. So I think that's one thing that we see a lot in community is the city is not always on board with helping, but there's some really good people out there who will contribute on their own. Sorry?
Was it Destinina?
No, it was, well, Genevieve, probably, she's a great person, but, it's, unfortunately, I don't see them being a partner. However, already the depot wasn't on board the year before and was super on board this year, and I think we will continue getting partners, great connections that will, it wasn't something that was huge for us to maintain, and luckily we did have, you know, myself and my staff and kids to help maintain it over the time, that there wasn't a big need for funding. I could look into it for sure.
I saw a question over.
I think part of my question was answered. It was about the continuity, right, and the funding. Have you ever looked into private corporate funders? I mean, that's a project that's got a lot of.
I have.
I was gonna say, it's only in the neighborhood. I would certainly do that. I wondered whether you saw it as a way of also providing food. I didn't, did food go to the depot or did the food go to the?
No, local, very local, our own people, and we were telling them they can just go. And
Yeah, because if it continues, I mean, it becomes a way of adding to the food security anyway. So I mean, it shouldn't be a hard sell.
I believe it's not, but I did, believe me,
It's a hard sell.
I went knocking at the Renault Depot and the Canadian Tire, which are
and
local.
And they said, don't you big ones?
They're two, they decided
Too corporate.
they decided that they no longer will support like locally. You have to call headquarters and they have to decide. And I tried. Yeah. That's yeah. That's like it's important to use local places and weird. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it wasn't an option this year. So there was another question.
I had a question from Lynn. Yeah, my question is, sorry, it's a great project, but it's for Andrea. It's Andrea. Hi. So in this process of exploring setting up a street school for the Anglophone, homeless or vulnerable at-risk youth, how are you going to identify who, you know, the need and who they are and where you would situate such a school, or would it have to be a mobile school, if you will?
That's a good question. I've never thought of a mobile school. No, I think that there's value from what I've seen from the 10 schools that are working, that there's value in having, you know, a home base for this type of school, alternative community-based school. It is at its heart an autonomous community organization, not, you know, doesn't call itself a school in the traditional sense, right? I think your question is about how you identify the need.
Yes, to get funding, you need to identify.
Absolutely. So the trajectory that I've been discussing with interested funders and groups that are already providing these kinds of services, but in a very kind of insecure way, in the sense they don't have continued funding, like the community project, etc. But what we've been talking about is doing a feasibility study over the course of a certain amount of time. Maybe we can get it done in 6 months. Maybe it might take a year. There are funders willing to fund multiple simultaneous feasibility studies in various regions. The need is there. The street school, just to give you an idea of scale, the street schools on average have about 15 to 20 students per year. There's one that has in the Gaspé region has many more than that. There are two in Montreal North. One of them has something like Montréal Nord, la combien de jeunes? 350. So it's true that the needs are different in each region, but I think that's one of the strengths of this model too. I've never seen a model that is so incredibly flexible and able to be responsive to the needs of a given community. So I think there's value in doing a feasibility study in a community where the partners involved in education and in youth lives and their trajectories already agree that there is such a need. So it's not, this is not anything that can be done in isolation or by one group, and that's not what I'm doing. Wi-Fi is not opening a street school. No. We can't, but I think bringing the right people together around the table to talk about it is something that we can do, that we have the bandwidth for, that maybe some local organizations who are working very hard on many files, seniors, youth, others, may not have the bandwidth to do.
Yeah, but have you, I think that one time it was the VMO who had funding for schooling, street use, English street use.
Oh, is that right?
I don't know whether it still exists, but this, I'm talking about maybe.
Bank of Montreal.
Bank of Montreal,
Okay, I didn't
10
know
or
that.
15 years ago, I'm talking about,
Okay,
so I don't know when my information is up to date, but they certainly did have.
Oh,
They did funded.
That was
They
the
were
school
funded
perseverance, wasn't it, Lynn? The school perseverance program.
Yeah,
With BMO and Jacques, what's his name?
Maybe. It was an actual place where the kids could go to learn. It wasn't just finding school perseverance.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, the banks have great programs. I've never gotten a bank.
It's just an avenue.
But I can tell you from my personal, I
Check it
tried
out.
the bank
Yeah.
funding route. I've just never liked anything that we've proposed. So I don't think I should get somebody else to write them. But if the BMO, we'll try
I
again.
don't know whether it still exists, but they
Yeah,
certainly have.
well, thank you for that lead.
Yeah.
If BMO still has that kind of, I think I will definitely look into that.
Yeah.
But I wonder if they would fund the same kind of study first and then
Yeah.
progression to pilot that a government funder might. It's hard to say, but thank you very much. Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes left. I saw Debbie, I see Tarima.
I was just gonna
And
say,
then I
I
saw it in
think for the English sector, and I know you and I have had conversations about this, but finding that a school board who's willing to sort of try it, you know, just give it a try in a region that where it's needed, and it's needed across, but there are definitely pockets in the English sector, but it's harder to do, right, because they're not really community schools.
Yeah.
The kids don't, you know, it's,
Right.
and then finding that location, so it doesn't, you don't want it to be in a school, because school has a bad connotation for people, so
It's true.
it can be tough.
It's gonna be tough, and yet there are, as I mentioned briefly in the presentation, there are organizations that are working extremely hard already with the kind of youth population that
They
this
do,
program would serve. And they're just not getting funded properly for what they're doing or in a sustainable way. And so there's a way to do this without having to reinvent the wheel, without having to create something that wasn't there before. And just putting together the partnerships. So we're talking about who are interested, and they are in contact with organizations that are already doing a kind of remedial homework, help and kind of bring them back into the fabric of society, kind of youth, and maybe explore additional options down the line. They're already kind of doing that work.
Two other, you could perhaps follow up with the English Montreal School Board, because they do have alternate schools where they offer for students who are very vulnerable and at risk.
The outreach schools?
Yeah, you might
Yeah.
just, the outreach schools, yes, you might want to just talk to them to get further information. And also, I think Riverside, they used to. They closed it.
I just need to because I actually work for the Riverside School Board and for 4 years now, I've applied for funding to run an alternative school project. Right now, I'm partnering with CEGEPS in Lemoine, and we're hoping to reach our Anglophones who are our Anglophone community for dropout kids. So I apply and think kids $75,000 I get every year from the government.
Oh, you're already getting it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, every year I apply for it. So that's why it goes to the school board, it's in partnership with someone in the school board. That the project is to reach youth running an alternative school project. And we need to have a partnership in order to receive the money. So I'm good.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Either one more question?
Yes, sorry, I missed the first part of the presentation, but I just was very curious about how you recruit the teachers, the people who are actually going to be conducting and like building this relationship of trust with the youth. And how do you not want to recruit them, but also like see if they're a fit for the community that they're going to go out and.
It's an excellent question. I'm gonna pass the mic to the expert.
Yeah, I think,
about the teacher.
I think the math
relationship. Yeah.
For a teacher, we are Parle en français.
Ouais,
Il y a une entente entre les écoles et la commission scolaire. Les professeurs sont passés par la commission scolaire ou par le centre de formation des adultes. Donc, c'est qu'il y a une entente. Ça dépend, des fois, ça peut être un 8 heures semaine, 12 heures semaine, 18 heures semaine. Il y a un professeur de mathématiques et un professeur de français. Puis, ben, ensuite, un professeur d'anglais ou de mathématiques.
Ouais.
Pour vous, ça va être professeur d'anglais.
Est-ce que ces profs-là, juste pour faire partie de ce programme, pour faire partie de ce projet, et de mettre en contact direct avec des jeunes qui vivent des enjeux, qui ne sont pas nécessairement aussi relatables que les jeunes qui sont déjà à l'école? Est-ce qu'eux, ils suivent, qu'ils font partie des formations, de sensibilisation et de tout ça avant d'entreprendre des relations avec ces jeunes?
Non, c'est ça le problème. En fait, les professeurs qui viennent, c'est parce qu'ils veulent être là.
Ouais.
Mais il y en a qui se ramassent avec une double tâche et qu'ils font comme, oh, c'est pas ce que je m'attendais, ça peut être difficile.
Puis est-ce que le programme, si vous voulez faire une étude pour recevoir des subventions de ça, il y aurait comme genre un aspect comment outiller les profs qui viennent faire ce programme?
Ça peut être fait, oui, ça pourrait être fait. Ça, c'est vrai, parce qu'au dernier, on a eu un colloque la semaine dernière et les professeurs nommaient cet élément-là.
Oui, parce que la réalité, juste d'être en classe et de...
Ben, il y a des intervenants qui sont là tout le temps. Donc, le professeur passe la matière, la matière est différente, elles sont pas toutes au même niveau. Et il y a des intervenants qui font l'encadrement.
Avec cela, c'est fini. On est rendu à 3h moins quart. So thank you all very much. Those were fantastic presentations. And enjoy the rest of the